everyone. I'm Iffy Chuku. Welcome to Reading Matters with Iffy. And today with me, all the way from Lagos, Nigeria, is John Obidi. John Obidi is the founder of this business group on Facebook called Smart Become, 80,000 members. And he's also a thought leader in personal development. So welcome, John, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Iffy.
Okay, so basically, Reading Matters with Iffy is about inspiring parents to start early to incorporate reading into the lives of their children, because reading could take them so many places. But in order for our viewers to know you better, if you could have dinner with one person of your choice, dead or alive, who would it be and why? You can say three of them, that's fine.
Okay. Well, first, this might be impractical, but if I could meet Jesus as a man, I know we say yes, God talks to everybody, but the way he was as a human being, that would be an interesting conversation, I think. Yeah, that's one. Two, perhaps Mark Zuckerberg.
Facebook guy.
Yes. I have studied his growth, and the things that drive him are really interesting. Okay. I think that I would like to ask questions regarding what drives him, how he sees the world, and where his vision is taking him.
Okay.
I follow his personal page on Facebook, and the things that he says are not just a man who's building a business. Mm-hmm. This is a person who is interested in modern civilization. If you watch the documentary, The Men Who Built America, mm-hmm. he is kind of a modern day version of those people, the Fords, those early inventors. I see him as a modern day type of person who is leading our civilization into the next era. So then perhaps Bill Gates.
Okay.
I'm attracted to the philanthropy end of part of Bill Gates.
Okay.
Bill Gates has done more than any single human being to fight HIV and AIDS and malaria in Africa. And he has been at the forefront of the war on polio in Nigeria.
Wow.
So this is not a guy who is really concerned with being the world's richest, because whenever he gets to the top again, he gives away his money and
giving back. Okay.
He just keeps on giving. The only reason he's not the richest man is because he gives away most of his money. Mm-hmm. So I would like to understand what drives such a man to, I know as Christians, the Bible says that a man's life does not consist in the abundance of things that he has. But when you see a man actually just giving away his personal wealth for the greater good, it's interesting. You need to know what exactly he has seen.
Exactly.
That motivates him to keep doing that.
I'm a member of Smart Become, and we know you share a lot of information, and we know you read a lot. So what does reading do for you?
I see reading as soap for the brain and food for the soul. There is so much that has happened in the world, and most of the battles that we're facing, most of the paths that we're undertaking, the missions that we're trying to accomplish have been accomplished by people before us. Okay. And by reading their documented lives, we can somehow find clues with which to win at our own battles. There's almost nothing that we're going through that's new. If you're talking about relationship-wise, marriage-wise, parenting, business, finance, career, there's nothing new that we're going through. The only different flavor is that it's us that's going through it. But people have gone through these things, they've won, they've innovated solutions, and they've documented these processes. Most of the solutions we're looking for are in some book somewhere that we have neglected to read. So I love to see books as soap for the brain. And when I say soap for the brain, we go through a lot of things in our lives, negativity, setbacks, disappointments. But when we read how other people have recovered from their own setbacks, we're like, okay, this is really nothing. And so we get back up. Unlike some people who get a hit and they stay down, they feel like there's no hope. But if you know that there's someone who went through something similar, you read through the stories of people like Maya Angelou. You read through the histories of people like Oprah Winfrey.
Yes.
When you read through those stories and you see what they made of themselves, you know that you don't have an excuse, right? You read through the story of Helen Keller and what she was still able to make out of herself with all those disabilities. And you know that, you know what, there are ways to get through this. So reading has been very instrumental. And most especially, I started reading personal development books, I think in 2012.
Okay.
And that was like a major shift in my life. I think that was the beginning of John Obidi 2.0. You know, the first time I picked up, I never knew there was a field called personal development. I just saw this book and I opened it and I was like, whoa, these are very different concepts than what I've been used to. So I saw books from Jack Canfield, Chicken Soup for the Soul. He also had another book on self-esteem. I ate up books from John Maxwell on leadership, which have borne fruit now in the way that I lead and the way that I lead my community. I've seen books from Les Brown and Napoleon Hill, and I mean it's been an amazing ride. So books contributed to my growth, and I think that everyone should read. Whatever path you're on or whatever path you intend to embark on, you should get on it. I remember reading the book by Peter Thiel, the guy at Google, 0 to 1, and it helped shape my paradigms for business. Many of the books that I cannot even mention now, but books, like I said, are soap for the brain and food for the soul. It should be an integral part of our civilization. You eat, you sleep, you read books.
As a child, did you read storybooks? And if you did, what was your favorite childhood book?
Okay, so this is a funny story, right? I grew up with very, very humble backgrounds. All we had was we had the barest necessities. So there were no luxury. There was no luxury income for storybooks or comic books, as was reigning back then.
Mm-hmm.
So there was really nothing story-like to read until one day I opened the Bible, which to me was a boring book until I saw that the Bible had so many stories.
Stories, yes.
And I was like, oh, wow, storybooks. And so I began to eat up the Bible. Even when I teach from the Bible in my adulthood, people think that's because I'm some kind of Bible scholar. I really haven't read the Bible much in my adult years. Most of what I know now is what I read as a child. I remember every single thing because I read them back to back because they were all I had. I had no means of getting comics or storybooks. So when I read Judges, I'll read about Esther, I read about Ruth, all these were all stories. I would go to the book of Revelation. That was horror, so I didn't read it. So I kept on moving, looking for the story parts. I read about David. So that was where I got the stories. And they didn't really have much meaning to me then because they were all stories of war and conquest, people overcoming their temptations. But as an adult, I began to see a lot of parallels in the battles that we face every day. You know, a lot of times you are walking in the shoes of David, you are facing the temptations of David. Sometimes you are walking in the shoes of Moses, you know, who had to lead people who were a pain in a lot of places, right? And yeah, you know, there's a lot there that's so relatable, and it really gave me the foundation for a lot of the work that I do right now. I know that there's this thing about the childhood mind, you know, that just soaks up stuff like a sponge, and you never really actually forget. I remember every single story I read as a child, every single one. And so it helped me find modern day solutions, you know. So beyond that, there's a book that I was gifted on my birthday. The only storybook I ever had access to was given to me by my cousin on my birthday, I think when I was 9. It was called Agent Z and the Penguin from Mars.
Okay.
So I remember that one. It was written by Mark Haddon.
I read up this statistics, or rather there's this research. Portion of boys that love to read are less than girls. We have these issues that boys just are quite reluctant in reading. So what do you think we can do to encourage more boys to develop this passion for reading?
Well, first off, I think that parents should invest more in properly determining the personality types of their kids, because I think it's a bit of a blanket case of, or it's a bit stereotypical for one to say that boys don't really like to read. You know, there are boys who don't really care about sports.
Mm-hmm. True.
But because it's the stereotype of, you know, you're a man, you should play sports, you should do this, you know, and so they have to, you know, keep up those appearances. But left to them, they would rather stay indoors and read. I knew a friend, okay, though this was a girl, back in school, her hobby, and that was the weirdest thing, her hobby was solving mathematical equations.
Wow.
She was really serious. Like, she said, look, this makes me happy. I mean, when I'm solving maths, I feel happy. I'm like, okay. You know,
Oh my God.
you know, I hope that's working well for her. She's married with kids now. I hope, you know, still makes her happy. But anyway, right. You know, but there are other people just like that, but people just box them and say, you know what, guys like sports, girls like dolls, you know. But I think that's the beauty of this modern age that we're in. We have more tools, we have more information, we have more specialists, and we have all these tests that, you know, kids can take, and you can best determine where their talents are most suited. So I think one has to be really careful not to connote that, you know, all male children are that way. Now, there might be some element of truth in there, though, because, you know, men generally have a higher level of testosterone, you know, and so, and as a child, there's a lot of energy. We are easily distracted, you know. Yeah, we don't sit still. We're always rabid all over the place, you know. But for me, so I'm not an expert in parenting, but I can just look at my growing up years and see what perhaps worked. Some might argue it's not very healthy, but we were made to stay indoors. And even when we were staying indoors, there were very limited opportunities, or would I say there were very limited options for entertainment. We had no cable, there was no electricity up NEPA, so we couldn't even watch television. And so the only thing I would stare at all day was my father's library. That was the only thing I would stare at. I would walk to the library, you know, and that's how I stumbled on my mother's book, Everyday Woman. Don't tell her. I was looking for things to read.
Yeah.
And I saw Everyday Woman, I'm like, interesting, you know. And then I kept that one back, and so that was all I had, like my father's library, and I would read books and read books and read books. So I don't know if this would work, but if you limit a child's options, they will make a lot out of that thing, you know. But today it's really hard. Back then, we didn't have mobile phones and the internet and all that. So when you came back home from school, you could actually sit still and pick a book. But now there are too many things. You know, there's WhatsApp, there's this. You know, back in the day when, in Nigeria, there was no way to inform a friend you were coming to visit. You would just hope that they were at home.
I did that so many times.
But today there's so much. You come back and you can't focus. Even on this phone, there's Instagram DMs. Switch over to WhatsApp. Switch over to Facebook. Oh my God, look at this funny video. Ha 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 ha. And all the time is gone. Nothing productive. You know, so curtailing the use of technology is going to be really effective. Yeah. I don't know how they're going to get around that, but if we can curtail the use of technology, let's not deceive ourselves and say, but we can read ebooks on our phones. Come on. How many people are able to domesticate their minds?
How can we inspire our children to read, even though we are aware of these distractions?
I think this would be practical for some more than others. But if you could actually read with them, one of the things that got me to read the Bible as a child was when we had family Bible study. And so my father would actually get involved in the process. So he would read and he would ask everyone else to read, you read. And so everyone has to read out. And so you would find yourself as a child, you're stumbling with certain words. And then you learn to pronounce those words because everyone's listening. So I'm sure he did not mean it this way, but this is just how it turned out. you know. And so we just learned to read aloud. And so every morning there was morning devotion. Everybody read some part of scripture. And so I would call that like training wheels. Learn to ride a bicycle.
Yes.
Those were training wheels. So when you're left alone, you know, you can just continue with that momentum. So getting involved, I don't know how much time different parents have free time on their hands, but if they can get involved in the process, it's different when you tell me to read than when I see as an aspirational figure,
Beautiful.
actually gets into the trenches with me and actually doing this thing. Because as children, our first gods are our parents. Our parents can never lie, can never cheat or steal or do any wrong. Those are our first gods. And so we mostly find ourselves modeling after our parents and shadowing our parents. There's so many things we took after our parents, from the way we hold the toothbrush to the way that we eat, the way that we blink or smile, those early things. So if parents can take advantage of that natural proclivity of children and nudge them into these positive attributes, I think a lot of people will take up reading. Let me add something, but this regards adults. A lot of adults would say that they don't have time for reading. And I would like to chip something in here. I remember when I first got on personal development, the year I decided that I wanted to make a drastic change in my life, right? That's when I just discovered personal development. The first book I read was As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. That was the first book. And I was like, whoa, this is amazing. And then I began to structure my life to accommodate reading time. And I realized that when we say we don't have time to read, we are just deceiving ourselves most of the time, because we have certain hours that are spent for socializing. So sometimes we have to choose between socializing and building up our mind. Yeah. And so what I did was that I realized that when I closed from work around 5 p.m., there's this buffer time between 5 and bedtime, like 10 or 9, where we're not really doing anything. We're hanging out with friends, catching up with TV shows and all that, and then we go to bed, and we still say we don't have time to read. And so I experimented with this at a time. I cut out all that time, and this is the weirdest thing, but when I closed work from 5, I would get back home, do what I had to do, and my bedtime became 7 p.m. Weird. 7 p.m. Why I did this so that I could have my full 8 hours of sleep and still cheat on the day by having extra hours before everyone else to read.
Wow.
So I used to wake up at 3 a.m. every single day, spend 1 or 2 hours reading. So I had reading timetables. You know, I had to discipline, domesticate my mind, like as if I was in secondary school. I had a reading timetable. Yeah. So this time to this time, I would read books to develop myself. This time to this time, I would read books to develop myself in my career. So I was having that all-round development. So when you say you woke up by 3 a.m., that means you have to sleep less. No, you can actually have the same hours of sleep. You can cut out all those unnecessary activities. So I didn't socialize, and of course, my friends would forgive me. I didn't socialize. I didn't do all that. 7 p.m. And so I would go from 7 p.m., I would sleep till 3, and I would be agile, rested, and I would read till 5 a.m., and the day starts. But I've gotten more into my day than the average person. So we always can find time. It's just that people probably see that as a priority. Yes. So
it's being intentional and disciplining yourself. And as a parent, when you discipline yourself, then your children can imitate you and the trend.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you so much. I've learned a lot as well from today's.
My pleasure.
So thank you so much. And I hope our parents there will take everything on board and, and just put it into practice in their various homes. So thank you so much, John. And
thank you too.
Yes, so see you another time.
Pleasure.